If you're in that big group of parents and students who are getting ready for back to school, you know that at the best of times, it's stressful, right? Let alone in the middle of a global pandemic. I mean, parents are trying to figure out if they should send their kids to school. Students are worried about what school will even look like. That's leading to a lot of anxiety all around. What can be done to help students adjust to school in this new reality? Our Chase team has reached Tina Montreuil. She's a clinical child psychologist and an assistant professor in the Department of Educational and Counseling Psychology at McGill University, and she is in Montreal. Tina, let's get right to it. What are you hearing about the anxiety level, and what's the cause of it?
Well, we do know that the sources of anxiety are fueled by the fact that things are uncertain, things are unpredictable, and we lack control. So obviously with this pandemic, it's made its way into all three of those elements. And therefore, that's why we're hearing such mass spreading of anxiety and stress reactivity to the current events.
I've heard from parents on both sides of that they are going to send their kids back to school. Some do not want to because they're worried about it. But what are the benefits of having kids back in a classroom setting?
Well, there are many angles to this question, but let's look at it not from a political perspective, but really just from a purely developmental or clinical perspective. So first and foremost, our children are way more resilient than sometimes we give them the credit for. So that's one of the first things that we need to be reminded as parents, is that our children are strong. They have a tolerance. The other thing is that for sure, certainly, children thrive around their peers. That's how they learn how to abide by social norms. That's how they learn, for example, to develop language. So it's a fact that there are many advantages for children to being with peers or amongst peers. By the same token, we can't look at it from, well, if they're not in school, they're going to do badly. I think there are things that parents that have decided to keep their children home and homeschool their children, there are things that can be done to really sort of remediate for maybe some social aspect that they might not be getting from the school context.
So you're sitting on the fence here.
Well, no, I'm not sitting on the fence. I'm just trying to really tell parents that, we just have to make a decision. We have to make the decision based on our values that prime. If we are comfortable sending our children back, I think there are many advantages, social, emotional, and developmentally for our children to be in school. But by the same token, some parents, there are many reasons why maybe going back to school is not as feasible. And so for those parents, we have to sort of also provide a structure, a context in which, they can optimally support their children's development within that context if they are forced to make that decision.
Every parent hopes they have an open line of communication with their kids, but they're not always the best communicators, I never asked my kids closed-ended questions that could be answered by yes or no. I always tried to make it open. But anyway, when it comes to kids and their behaviors, what should parents be looking for that they may not be hearing from the kids themselves, but signs that they could be suffering from some form of anxiety?
Yes. So I think it can go some ways. So it can go both ways, actually. Some children will just become more externalizing. So they'll become more irritable. They'll have more tantrums. Visibly, we know externally there's something going on, whereas other children will withdraw more. And a lot of children actually that are anxious, we call it kind of the silent disorder, because, sometimes children can be excruciatingly anxious and still it not being as evident. So what I would suggest to parents is just look out for just changes in behavior. If your child is usually one that's very externalizing, very communicative, and all of a sudden they're more withdrawn, they're holding back, they're less communicative, that might be an indication. And for other children where normally they're more easy to work with and all of a sudden they become very irritable, that might also be a sign. And we also have to factor in as well, like the developmental age, right? So depending how old your children are, well, the younger ones, the preschoolers, might become more irritable, more tantrumy, and not be able to express. And maybe with adolescents, they might withdraw more. You might find them more in their room or more secluded. So just look for really stark differences and that are consistently maintaining themselves. I think that should be a good indicator for parents.
And Tina, would it hurt if you sent your kids to school, say you weren't really sure, and you thought, you know what, let's see how it goes. I'm going to send my son or daughter back to school. If you pull them out in a month because you're seeing some of these signs, is that more detrimental than trying to work it through and keep them in school?
So I think it's twofold. I think the way we have to see it is that I think that's part of resilience. That's kind of the dialogue that I'm having with my eldest son, actually, is saying, you know what, right now there's a lot of questions that are unanswered. I'm trying to model to him that it's okay to not have all the answers and to really focus on what it is that I can control right now. So for example, maybe preparing the school bag, if that's what we're going to be doing, and things like that. And so I think the idea is to say, you know what, let's just give it a try. That's how life is. Let's give it a try and let's see, because obviously as you're going forward in a situation, you're also collecting more facts. So of course, once they're in school 2 weeks time or a week's time, we're going to have more information. We're going to know how they're doing. We're going to see how the school is reacting to this new reality. We're going to hear about, our contagion rates increasing. So this is the way to approach a situation. It's almost like an investigation. So we're saying you're telling your children that, we don't have all the answers right now. So we have to make a decision based on the answers and the facts that we have. And as we go, you know what? We're strong. We can do this. We're going to figure it out as we go. So really, I think the worst thing that a parent could do is that if you do have to pull out your child for whatever reason, to get back to your question, is that try not to catastrophize it or make it a dramatic thing, to really sort of like play as it comes and evaluate. And on your question of, so yes, maybe you want to go ahead, but I think we have to look at the severity as well.
I did want to ask you one final question, just for timing purposes. We have to keep it shorter. But Tina, I know you're a clinical child psychologist, but you also deal with anxieties that adults may have, in this case, parents. Yeah. What advice do you have for them, who are feeling that anxiety and do not want to pass it on to their kids?
Yes. So first and foremost, tell yourself it's normal to have certain level of worry. I mean, this pandemic makes it as such. The second thing you want to do is that you want to make sure, even though it's hard to have those conversations with your children about things that may increase your own anxiety, the first thing, engage in as much self-care activity, things that you enjoy as much as possible, so that you do have the emotional availability to engage with your children in discussions, and then just talk to them. If they're talking about difficult things that are stressful, again, keep calm and really listen, validate, normalize that any type of emotions that we're feeling are okay to be felt, and really try to problem solve with them, pull into the resources to see how they feel that they can cope. A lot of the times we feel like we have to come up with the answers, and we'd be surprised how intuitive, how creative our children can be to sort of manage through these situations on their own with our assistance.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you, Tina. I thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Tina Montreuil is a clinical child psychologist. She's also with McGill University. Right now, she is in Montreal.